Imagine the history of breaking on the wheel on a cold and foggy morning of the 14th century, where the silence of a European village is not broken by the crowing of a rooster or the ringing of church bells, but by the heavy and continuous blows of a hammer on wood. The man standing there, preparing a wooden platform, is not an ordinary carpenter. He is the assistant of the executioner, and he is not preparing a stage for drama, but a stage of human suffering, the mere thought of which is enough to make the soul tremble. It was called the Day of High Justice, the day when law did not remain an imaginary word, but became a living, bone-crushing reality. To understand this horrific punishment, we must set aside modern concepts of human rights. In the Middle Ages, the body of the criminal was considered the property of the state. It was a canvas upon which the king or regional lord wrote the message of his absolute power. A crowd began to gather in the town square, where the smell of roasting meat and the stench of human sweat created a strange atmosphere. For poor peasants, this punishment was like a terrifying fair, where rich and poor alike came together to watch the purification of a soul. The wheel, often an ordinary ox cart wheel with an iron rim, was placed beside the platform. For a farmer, it was merely a means of transportation, but for the prisoner locked in the dungeon, it was the instrument that would shatter his entire skeleton. The philosophy behind this punishment was deep and terrifying. In an era without police or modern technology, the only way to prevent crime was the spectacle of deterrence. If someone committed a crime that shook the foundations of society, such as highway robbery or the murder of parents, the state believed that his death should be just as violent and conspicuous as his crime. The purpose of the wheel was to deprive the criminal of an easy death. Hanging was too quick, and beheading was considered an honorable death. The wheel meant destroying a human being gradually. When the prisoner was brought out, the noise of the crowd would rise. He was stripped naked and bound to a wooden X-shaped frame. The executioner, often wearing a mask so that it appeared he was not an individual but the hand of the law, lifted the wheel and began the process of punishment. This is where the scientific process of breaking bones began, a process whose sole purpose was to inflict pain. The executioner raised the wheel and struck the prisoner's limbs with full force. The first blow usually landed on the shins. More terrifying than the screams was the sound of bones breaking. It sounded like wet wood cracking. Then came the turn of the thighs, arms, and shoulders. By the 8th blow, the prisoner's hands and feet had turned into lumps of flesh, with bones remaining only as fine fragments. Sometimes a judge, taking pity, would order a secret rope, by which the prisoner would be strangled before the breaking began. Or a mercy blow would be delivered directly to the chest or neck, so that the suffering ended immediately. But for serious criminals, the order was that the blows should begin from the lower body, and the chest should be spared, so that the victim would remain conscious until the end. After the bones were broken, the second stage began, known as weaving. The executioner threaded the broken arms and legs through the angled spokes of the wheel. Because the bones had already been shattered, the body could be bent like a rope. The human being had now become a human knot, which was then hoisted onto a tall pole. From there began the prisoner's final and long wait. Death did not come immediately. It was a slow contest of internal bleeding, thirst, the intensity of the sun, and infection. In summer, the heat of the sun scorched the skin, and in winter, the blood froze. The most horrific sight was when vultures and crows began to tear at a living human being. History records cases where criminals remained alive on the wheel for 3 days. They continued speaking with priests and begged for repentance. Why did society accept such brutality? According to the medieval mindset, the breaking of the body symbolized the breaking of sins. It was believed that by enduring this severe pain in this world, the criminal could be saved from the fires of hell. Furthermore, These wheels were erected at the entrances of cities. For any traveler entering the city, the first sight was bodies hanging on wheels, silent yet revolving warnings. Here, the rule of law is absolute. In the 18th century, the era of enlightenment laid the foundation for the abolition of this punishment. Thinkers argued that the role of the state was not to take revenge, but to prevent crime. After the French Revolution, this punishment was declared inhuman and replaced by the guillotine. In Germany, this punishment lasted the longest and was last used in 1841. Today, this wheel is found only in museums. It stands as a monument to a time when justice meant only blood and iron, and the human body was used as a stage to display the power of the state. Where did this cruelty begin? Who was its first victim? And which rulers made it a symbol of their power? Although the punishment of the wheel is associated with medieval Europe, its roots are even older. Historians believe that its early concept can be found among the ancient Romans and Germanic tribes. There was no single inventor. Rather, it emerged as a customary practice. During the Roman Empire, it was used to make rebels an example. The most famous religious reference to this punishment is Saint Catherine of Alexandria. In the 4th century AD, during the reign of Emperor Maxentius, an attempt was made to kill her on this wheel. According to tradition, the wheel miraculously broke as soon as she touched it, which is why it came to be known as the Catherine wheel. French kings and the emperors of the Holy Roman Empire played a major role in giving this punishment legal form. In 1534, King Francis I of France declared it a mandatory punishment for robbers and murderers. In 1532, Emperor Charles V enforced a legal code known as the Constitutio Criminalis Carolina, which granted the punishment of the wheel the status of high justice in Central Europe. Among the famous victims of history, Peter Stump stands out. In 1589, he was broken on the wheel in the German city of Bedburg after being declared a werewolf. Hans Kohlhase faced this punishment in Berlin in 1540, and his story later became part of world literature. Similarly, Louis-Dominique Cartouche, a famous French bandit of the 18th century, was broken on the wheel in the center of Paris in 1721 before thousands of people. His death fueled public hatred against this punishment. Although complete records from that era do not exist, estimates suggest that between 1500 and 1800, thousands of people were subjected to this punishment in Germany alone. In France, this punishment was so common that a wheel was erected almost every week at Paris's central square, Place de Grève. As the world changed, this savage punishment also moved toward its end. In France, it was abolished in 1791, immediately after the French Revolution. In Germany, the last official record dates to 1841. A man named Rudolf Ebert was the final victim of this punishment in Prussia. Thus, the last echo of this instrument fell silent on European soil. This punishment was not given merely to take life, but to completely destroy the body. It was believed that one whose body was broken and woven into the wheel would not rise again on the day of judgment. It was a psychological war that rulers waged against their subjects. Today, when we see those wooden wheels in museums, they remind us of that dark past, where the scales of justice were tipped by the heavy blows of iron. The wheel has stopped, but its marks are permanently etched on the pages of human history.